Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the Capital Extension Fall 2025 Design Update. My name is Erica Rubio, the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Capital Extension, and on behalf of the project, thank you very much for spending your lunch hour with us. Before we get started, I would like to let you all know that we are offering simultaneous Spanish language interpretation for this meeting. There may be some pauses throughout the presentation so that our Spanish and English presentations are in sync. On the screen now is the number that you may call in to hear the Spanish audio. I would like to introduce now our wonderful Spanish interpreter, Paulette. Paulette, would you like to turn on your camera and introduce yourself?
Hola, buenas tardes. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Paulette Castillo, Spanish interpreter. Se está proveyendo interpretación simultánea en este momento. Para poder adherirse a este grupo, por favor, hable al número que está en pantalla. Quizá haya pausas adicionales durante la presentación.
Thank you so much, Paulette. Before we jump in, I additionally want to share a few tips for today's meeting. First, please know that we've muted all of the participants to avoid background noise. Also, there will be a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. You can submit your questions at any time during the meeting using the Q&A function at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I will share additional Q&A instructions at the end of the presentation. Also, good to know, there is closed captioning available for this meeting. You can turn on the closed captioning option using the meeting menu on your screen. And finally, we hope you have a smooth experience at today's meeting. But if you have any issues at all, you can call WebEx support or call into the meeting using the numbers on screen. We will also add those numbers to chat for additional reference. Okay, so let's get started. Joining me for today's presentation is Paul Lopez, Project Manager for the Capital Extension, and Marcus Coleman, City of Phoenix Light Rail Administrator. We will begin today by reviewing a history of the Capital Extension and its connection to the I-10 West project. We will then go on to learn more about the upcoming City Council decision process that will determine how light rail moves forward in Phoenix. You will also get time to view and compare the 3 new route options that we are proposing for the Capital Extension. And then we will wrap up by letting you know all of the different ways that you can submit your feedback before we move on to our question and answer session with the team. Okay, so speaking of feedback, feedback is incredibly important to this process. Everything that you submit, whether it be by virtual feedback form, whether you have sent an email to the project team, made a phone call, or even submitted a paper form at one of our meetings, we combine all of that information along with a technical review, and we use that to compile a report or a recommendation for the City of Phoenix City Council, as well as the Valley Metro Rail Board of Directors. So your feedback is absolutely important to this process because we want to know what you think about the options presented to you. To get into a little bit of history about the Capital Extension and 10 West projects, it's important to know that they were originally proposed as one long extension, one that would connect from the currently existing system in downtown at 3rd Avenue, run through the Capitol Mall, and then take us to the Desert Sky Mall Transit Center. In 2016, it was decided by Phoenix City Council that the project would adopt a 2-phase process. Phase 1 of the project became CAPEX, or otherwise known as the Capital Extension, which is the first phase that would take us from downtown through the Capital District. Phase 2 became the 10 West project. And now to give us a bit more detail about the 10 West project, I would like to invite Paul Lopez to share the details. Paul?
Thanks, Erica. So with the picture that is shown on the slide on the screen, you'll identify with the map that basically the line that's shown in gray is that portion of the larger project, the second phase, which is 10 West. And I'll come back and I'll hit on that a little bit more. But on the bottom right of that map, you'll see something called out State Capitol with a couple different color lines. And those are some of the alignments that we took back earlier this year in midsummer, and started doing some public outreach on how would we tie the CAPEX project together with the 10 West project, since they had been split into two separate phases, as Erica mentioned. What you see on the far right is the green loop, and that was going to be the capital extension project early on. Since that point in time and reaching out to the public, we've come up with a couple different alignments that we're going to present a little bit later in the presentation today for the CAPEX project, as well as go over where the stopping points would be for the CAPEX project and where 10 West would pick up. For the intents of kind of explaining the 10 West project at this point, as we said, it is a second phase and it's further down the road in terms of design. Right now, it's in its early planning and design stages. But as you can see, as it extends from the colored lines there by the state capitol at about 19th Avenue in Van Buren, it would extend westerly to about the I-17 alignment. From there, it would turn due north on I-17, at which point it would enter the I-10 right-of-way. On I-10, it would travel westerly along the center median, and all the way down to roughly about 47th Avenue, at which point it would diverge from the center median and it would go to the north side of the freeway main line, adjacent to the drainage channel. At that point, it would basically run adjacent to that drainage channel along the north side of the I-10 main line, all the way down to roughly 79th Avenue, at which point it would turn due north and go all the way north to the Desert Sky Transit Center at the point of termination. As you can see, we've planned for roughly about 8 stations along this alignment. They're identified by white dots. And again, this is very preliminary, so these are subject to change still. It's just a first stab or preliminary shot at where these stations could end up. We also are planning to have a park and ride roughly around the 59th Avenue area, that will also be able to attach to the 10 West project. And roughly this alignment of 10 West is about 10 miles, more or less, from where CAPEX extension would stop, and it would end up at Desert Sky. With that, I will pass it back to Erica until I can get into a little more detail on the proposed CAPEX alignments.
Thank you very much, Paul. So here we have a timeline of the development of the CAPEX and 10 West projects. So it is a lengthy timeline, and if you want to get into the nitty-gritty and all of the details, you can visit valleymetro.org/CAPEX to view the complete history. But I want to focus on 2 specific dates towards the end of the timeline. I will take us first to 2024, at which time SB 1102, a piece of state legislation, was signed. And that did 2 things for the capital extension project. First, it allowed for Prop 479 to be on the ballot, which allowed for Maricopa County voters to have a say in transit investment in our communities, and that's an excellent thing. SB 1102 also enacted a new restriction in the Capitol Mall area, meaning that high capacity transit, such as light rail, was no longer able to travel within 50 yards of the Capitol building. That is the primary reason why the original extension, which used to travel down Washington, turn on 19th Avenue, and then travel back onto Jefferson, it was no longer a viable option, and the alignment was then shortened to 15th Avenue. That restriction is still in place to this day, and it's something that we have to be mindful of as we propose new routes. I will also bring us to 2025. In the summer, as Paul mentioned previously, that is when we began collecting new feedback on how to connect the newly shortened CAPEX project to the future 10 West project. So if this map here looks familiar, it's because these are the options that we took to the public first beginning in May 2025 to get a feel for what people valued and what they wanted or where they wanted the connection points to travel. We found some key themes during this outreach that wrapped up not too long ago in October 2025. Some of those key themes were support for community development and the development of the Capitol Mall, of course, the preservation of the historic neighborhoods that surround the Capitol Mall, as well as maintaining the ease of access for those commuting by car to the Capitol, as well as all the nearby government buildings. And so it was those themes that were of heavy consideration as the project team developed the updated routes that you'll be viewing later on today. Now, before you get to see those new routes, there is one more thing that I would like to cover, and that is a decision that will be made by Phoenix City Council later this month on January 27th, 2026. So, in addition to asking you which of the updated routes you'd prefer, there is an additional consideration. Phoenix City Council is looking for feedback on whether the public would like to adopt an updated capital extension route and continue on the project as planned, or if the public prefers a reevaluation of how high capacity transit will serve West Phoenix. So keep that in mind as we go through these scenarios that we will be presenting here shortly. Okay, Paul, you're up again. So now I'd like to bring Paul Lopez back up to share with you the updated route options for the capital extension.
Thank you, Erica. So we'll start with the first alignment alternative for option one that Erica discussed, which Phoenix City Council would vote on. So again, to reiterate, they will vote on one of these three LPA, or one of these three alignments to move forward with an LPA, or they would vote to reevaluate the transit to the West Valley, West Phoenix. So with this first alignment, 16th Avenue North, jumping right into it, you'll see on the far right of the map, we've got our standard CAPEX area ending at 3rd Avenue and Jefferson and 3rd Avenue and Washington currently. That is a single track couplet, and basically what that means is there is a westbound train going down Washington and an eastbound train going down Jefferson, and it loops at 3rd Avenue currently. From that point, there's spurs on both Jefferson and Washington that we are able to tie into, and we would continue to run it as a single track loop down around 4th Avenue. At 4th Avenue and Jefferson, we would tie those two tracks together and run a dual track alignment from 4th Avenue and Jefferson westerly all the way down to 14th Avenue or Cudahy. At 14th Avenue or Cudahy, we would then turn due north to Washington, where we would then diverge to the west and go again with the dual rail track alignment all the way down to Wesley Boland Park before we would veer to the north and eventually end up terminating right around Van Buren. On this particular alignment, there's 3 different stations identified with white dots, one just east of 7th Avenue, a second one proposed between 12th and 15th, and then a third one proposed just north of Wesley Boland Plaza near the state capitol. The line identified in red would be the extension of the future 10 West project, which would continue to go down Van Buren Street over BNSF Railroad, which has to be elevated at the crossing right there, and then it would head due north on I-17 till getting to I-10. This particular alignment, if you look on the left, we have a couple things that we're going to compare and kind of summarize toward the end, but it's about 1.3 miles of track. Its schedule impacts and its estimated property impacts are very similar to what we had presented to the public before. We've already been in this area for a while, studying it for quite some time. The major change here is instead of running a single track couplet all the way down to 15th Avenue, we've now kind of combined and done a dual track on Jefferson. And so the estimated property impacts and schedule impacts are fairly negligible in terms of we could keep this kind of running very close to the schedule we previously had in terms of delivery. With that, I'll jump into the second alignment, which is our 16th Avenue South alignment. On 16th Avenue South, it's very similar. We've got the same termination points of the existing system at 3rd Avenue and Jefferson. Again, we're running that single track couplet around 4th Avenue and Jefferson. And from there, again, we would pick up dual track at 4th Avenue and Jefferson, heading westerly all the way down to roughly 16th Avenue. On this alignment at 16th Avenue, we would then head south and go down to Madison. At Madison, we would then veer to the west, and again with that dual track alignment, go all the way through 17th Avenue, roughly terminating at about 18th Avenue. A couple things of note on this particular alignment is since we have to be elevated by the time we get to 19th Avenue, where the BNSF Railroad is, we would likely go elevated on this particular alignment roughly around the 16th Avenue area. We would start gaining elevation, and that station that's proposed at 17th Avenue would likely be elevated. The other two stations on this particular alignment are roughly the same exact locations as what the north alignment was, which is just east of 7th Avenue, and then again between 12th and 15th Avenue. Again, on this map, similar to the other one, the extension of the I-10 West would be the red dashed line. However, of particular note on this alternative is it would extend down Madison, not down Van Buren on this alignment, veering toward Jackson right around 19th Avenue with that reverse curve, and then heading westerly along Jackson to a point on I-17 where it would then go north and tie into I-10 in the median once again. So this I-10 extension is a little bit different in terms of the alignment, but gets us to the same point for the future 10 West extension. It too is about 1.3 miles of track as shown. The schedule impacts again on this one are low, as well as the building impacts and or right-of-way impacts, because again, we're still in that Jefferson-Washington corridor that we had previously studied for the most part. Moving over to the third alignment, this is our 7th Avenue North alignment. And what you'll see here is at the very beginning of the project, everything's very much the same. Still doing that dual track pickup at 4th Avenue and Jefferson. Everything east of there is single track. But as we head from Jefferson and 4th Avenue, it stays dual track. We keep that first station at 7th Avenue, but as we reach 7th Avenue, you'll notice we veer to the north. As we go north on 7th Avenue, we would, at the intersection of Grand, 7th Avenue, and Van Buren, then head westerly and go to the next station, which is currently shown right around the 8th Avenue, 9th Avenue location, somewhere close to 7th Avenue. And then we would continue westerly, roughly to about 16th Avenue, and add one more station or pick up one more station roughly at 15th Avenue. So that's the third alignment. Again, similarly to the other exhibits, the red dashed line depicts the future 10 West extension. Similar to the first alignment, which was our 16th Avenue North, this alignment goes through Van Buren all the way down to 17 and then connects northerly through to I-10 in the median again. This particular alignment is only about 1.2 miles in length, so it's slightly less than the others, but very close. The schedule impacts as well as the estimated property impacts on this one are a little bit more moderate because we have not studied this corridor on Van Buren significantly. We've spent most of our time in the Washington and Jefferson corridor. So we do think that there could be some potential schedule impacts and or building impacts. However, those delays would be minor in nature. We just need to really work through what those could be. And so again, this one's a little bit more ambiguous in terms of what the schedule impacts and or property impacts could be because we're outside of that previously studied corridor. With that being said, that's kind of the three different alignments. Now we will show a map of all three alignments on the same area so that you all can get a fairly good idea of how they run. Again, in purple is the 7th Avenue North alignment, the last one I showed. In kind of that blue color, I'll call it, is the 16th Avenue North alignment. And then in the green color is our 16th Avenue South alignment. All of them have their termination points. All of them have a way to connect to I-10 for the future 10 West project. And they're all kind of compared on this map side by side. Moving forward, we have a table that compares not only those three alignments I just presented, but also what the impacts might be from a reevaluation standpoint. Those same symbols we used on the slides for the alignments, the first one being the length of track, as well as the schedule and or the building or right-of-way impacts are shown on the left side of the column here. As we talked about, the 16th Avenue North and South are about 1.3 miles with low schedule and building impacts, whereas on the 7th Avenue, it's a little bit less, 1.2 miles, but it's basically got a moderate impact to schedule and or housing, or I'm sorry, not housing, but right-of-way or land impacts. And then the reevaluation, we just don't know. We don't know if City of Phoenix would give us that direction at that council meeting, how they would like to proceed. Would it be mass transit of a different mode, or would it be the same mode, but in terms of light rail, but a different alignment or corridor? And so those are things that we just don't know on some of those, but that kind of gives you the comparison of the options that the council's going to have the opportunity to vote on the 27th. And again, that's where your input comes in, and it's important. And with that, I'd like to next invite Marcus Coleman, our light rail administrator for the city of Phoenix, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the importance of that public feedback.
Thank you, Paul.
Marcus?
Thank you for handing that over and for your summary of that and what will be going to our city council. Go to the next slide. I just want to make sure that everyone who is here is very aware and just kind of reiterate what Paul said and what Erica also was able to speak to earlier, is that January 27th is the date that this item will be going to our city, our full city council for a policy meeting. At that meeting, our council will have one of two options to decide from, and one is to adopt a capital extension route, a locally preferred alternative, which we've shared the three alternatives that will be shared with our full council on that date. Or the other option is to do a reevaluation of high capacity transit, really taking a moment to look at the reinvestment of transit funding into high capacity transit reaching West Phoenix. Next slide, please. One of the things that we make sure that is important to our city council, our mayor and council, is that they receive the community's feedback, stakeholders' feedback, whether it be property owners, business owners, residents, visitors to the area. It's critically important for our council to be informed. On your screen right now, you'll see that there's a QR code that you can scan that QR code and it'll take you directly to the survey. We have a survey that we have online. We also, whenever we're out in the community, we have hard copies of the survey. So if you see any of our team members out, we normally will have those hard copies with us as well. If you don't have the smart device and able to go to the QR code, you can always go to you can always go to our valleymetro.org/CAPEX. There's a website there that we also have the feedback form there. You can fill out that information at your earliest convenience. Please share. This is one of the things that we're asking. This is a call for action to the community and all those who are attending. We would like for you to share this information with your neighbors, with your friends, with your coworkers, family members, anyone that you know or come across that may be either that lives, resides in the area, visits the area, frequents the area, or utilizes transit and would like to have that access to these areas. It's important that our council, when they take action on January 27th, that they are informed of what the community is, what their sentiment is. And so all this information that we're collecting will be gathered in a summary report and provided to our mayor and our council so that they can utilize this as a tool and a resource while determining what course of action they want to take. And so with that, don't want to belabor this any longer than what I already have. We'll take some questions and answers, and I'll hand it back over to Erica to lead us off.
Thank you very much, Marcus. So I will be providing instructions on how you can ask your questions today. There are two different ways that you can ask a question. The first is written. So to submit a written question, please look for this button, the apps button at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can submit a question using the box that says Audience Q&A. If you submit a written question, your question will be read by a moderator. The second option is to ask a question verbally. The way that you do that, if you're on desktop, is you find this button, the raise hand button, and you'll be called upon. If you are called upon, you'll receive a prompt to unmute yourself. If you're using a phone line, you will hit *3 to raise your hand as opposed to using a button. If you're on a phone, you will be asked to unmute. You can click unmute me if you're on desktop, or if you're on the phone, you'll hit *6 when prompted. So again, if you are a phone caller, you'll hit *3 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself while prompted. The other option for mobile users is to hit this button here, the More Options button, and that is where you will find the option to raise your hand. With that, we will go ahead and start taking questions.
Yes. Our first question, if approved by City Council, when would each of these 2 phases be completed?
You want me to take a stab at that, Marcus? Okay, so right now with the phases on both the 16 North alternative as well as the 16 South alternative, we're trying to get into revenue service by the end of 2029. So that would be end of calendar year 2029. With 7th Avenue, it could be just a little bit longer than that, but we hope to pick up anything time-wise that we would lose going through that new corridor that we haven't really investigated in thorough detail, so that we wouldn't be too much further than that. But that remains to be seen based on what we run into in terms of what kind of right-of-way impacts or building impacts there could be on that 7th Avenue North, and then how quickly we would need to elevate that corridor, looking at ultimately elevating by the time we get to the BNSF at 19th Avenue. So that would be where those go. As far as if council chose to reevaluate, I don't really have a great answer on that. It really just depends on which direction they point us to go in. Marcus, you want to add to that?
The only thing I would add is, and I'm thinking that the question is more geared to option 1, is that right now, we are scheduled for revenue service date, as you said, Paul, for the CAPEX of 2030, end of 2039, early 2030, sometime in that time frame. Our 10 West project is currently our projected revenue service date on that right now is 2034. That's where we currently are. If council were to take direction of option number 2, we couldn't answer that right now because we don't know what the scope of that is, and so we would need to know. Council would need to determine what the scope would be. We would then have to work together to develop a work plan, which would, of course, include a community engagement component of that, and then also a pricing of that. And then after that, reevaluation or recommendation would be made. That recommendation would then have to go to council, and then we could develop schedules and those things after we receive that final direction from council. So I hope that answers the question.
I'll step in here just briefly, Marcus. Can you please say the date for CAPEX again? I believe you may have misspoke the first time.
CAPEX right now, 2029, 2030.
Wonderful, thank you.
What did I say the first time?
39.
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
It's okay, we do a lot of these presentations.
Yes.
Okay, next question.
Yes. I'm in favor of any proposal that would reach the West Valley the quickest and allow for reasonable transit times to downtown and future. Which of these would most likely result in the phase 2 being started the soonest?
So I can jump in on that or start with that, Marcus. If you have anything, please add in. So right now, the alignment going 16 North or 16 South are the most promising as far as getting to market as quickly as possible and maybe potentially extending down 10 West as quickly as possible. Those are the 2 that have the opportunity to be delivered the soonest. One of the other things you mentioned was good timing as far as being able to travel from the West Phoenix into the center of the city. And that I-10 West alignment, one thing I neglected to bring up during the presentation is it does have the ability to travel at the same speed of the corridor that it's on. So going down the center of the freeway there allows us to travel at that 65 mile per hour range if we go down there, which will allow for efficiency in transporting from the West Phoenix area down to the center Phoenix area. Versus if you were going on an adjacent arterial, you'd be limited to that 45 mile per hour speed limit, as well as having to deal with all of the traffic signals along the way. So from an efficiency standpoint and how quickly we can bring this to market, I would say either the alignment of 16 North or 16 South are the two that have the most promising outcome.
This question may have been answered, but I want to read it to provide clarification because I believe it's just focusing in on the images of the route options that we've shown, and I think some context will help in answering this. So it says, when voted on and passed, the transit tax promised light rail expansion to the West Valley. All of these proposals seem to delay any opportunity to get light rail service reaching beyond I-17, or yes, the I-17.
Can you state that again?
When voted on and passed, the transit tax promised light rail expansion to the West Valley. All of these proposals seem to delay any opportunity to get the light rail service reaching beyond I-17. More of a statement.
I guess that's more of I guess I could take it as a statement or a question. I'll just offer this component to it. As Paul stated, their 16 North and the 16 South would keep us online, or will has the most favorable opportunity to keep us in line with our revenue service date that we currently are tracking towards, which that revenue service date of the capital extension is the first step in that second step of the 10 West, which does head west of the I-17. That would continue to keep us on our trajectory that we have within our T2050 program. However, if they were to do a reevaluation, depending on what that reevaluation scope is, that does not necessarily mean that it will be a delay. If the council came back and decided that light rail would be the mode and we would look at a different route or a different corridor, then yes, that would end up being a delay of that project. However, if council decided to go with a different mode, I don't know if that would necessarily mean a delay of getting west of the I-17. We would have to have more analysis done from a technical side, from a financial side, from a corridor side. There's several different factors of that, which we just don't have those parameters because our council would need to be able to make it very clear what that directive is before we could start that process.
The next question, I believe, is asking about an older version of a map that we showed in regards to some older route options, and I'll read it. Earlier in the presentation, there was an option that was not discussed, indicating 15th Avenue South. Can you please provide context around this option, and is it included in the City Council vote?
So what I will tell you is the information that we provided to our council is the same information that is being shown here today. Our council has seen the previous alignment options as well as the new alternative alignment options, and and the three alternative alignment options that have been presented to our council is what staff is making a recommendation. Well, not making a recommendation, is what staff is presenting to our council. However, our council does have the ability to decide from a previous alignment option that we have provided to them. They do have the ability to take action on one of those alignments as well. What we have heard from our council so far through this process, through our transportation infrastructure and planning subcommittee process, is that we have not received any recommendation from any part or whole of our council to look at any other options outside of what we're presenting. So that January 27th date, we will present those three options that will be presented to our council, and they will take action then. At that time, if they decided to move away from these three options and maybe decide on another alternative, that would more so fall under the option two, which is the reevaluation of how we invest in high capacity transit to reach West Phoenix with or without the capital extension. So that could still include that capital extension mall area. And so that would fall under that option two piece of that.
I just want to clarify, is the previous alignment one-way track loop no longer on the table because of SB 1102?
So what I will say to that is the previous single track on Washington and Jefferson with the 15th Avenue loop, there were several things that took place to get us to a place of double tracking on Jefferson. One of the items that took place in order for us to do that is a value engineering process. So normally with these projects, what we do is we work with our designer and we work with our contractor on contract to evaluate the project and see if there's any ways that we can reduce costs and increase efficiencies while still delivering the same level of service. This really is making sure that we ensure that the community still gets the level of service and the expectation is met that has been provided to the community. However, we're looking at ways that we can reduce costs and be efficient with the resources that we currently have. And so through that value engineering, double tracking on Jefferson was one of the items that showed significant cost decrease to the project. It reduces your right-of-way footprint. It reduces the amount of utilities that we have to relocate due to conflicts. It keeps our corridors and keeps our corridor to one corridor and allows us to reduce the number of facilities that we need. And when I say facilities, looking at things like light rail stations and platforms, the overhead catenary poles, which are the poles that carry the wire that powers the light rail vehicle. Those type of things, we're able to reduce the number of those that we are utilizing because we're on one corridor instead of being in two different right-of-ways. And then also, we had significant stakeholder concerns that we've heard from stakeholders that were east of 7th Avenue. Stakeholder concerns around their ability to secure their facilities, stakeholders' concerns about ingress and egress. And so those are some of the things that we also had to take into consideration, similar to as you see on the west portion of these alternatives that we've shown. That's how we got to where we are today with the 16 North, 16 South, and 7th Avenue is taken into consideration the feedback that we receive from stakeholders in those areas as well. And so we try to make sure that this is an iterative process, that we're continuing to refine these designs and address stakeholder concerns as they come up, as also being safeguarding of taxpayer dollars and making sure we're being the most efficient as we can with those dollars as well.
Next question. Please provide details regarding what buildings are impacted in each option. Are there historic buildings? Can we get a detail on the map indicating how many and type of buildings would be impacted and to what extent?
I'll take a stab at that one. So at this stage, these alignments are all fairly preliminary. We haven't gone through and actually detailed the designs, looking at the widths and all that type of thing. However, we are fairly confident that the only of these alignments that we're aware of that impacts a building directly is the 16 North alignment, and just north of the Wesley Bullen Memorial Plaza, there is a currently vacated ADOA building that we have coordinated with the ADOA on. Arizona Department of Administration. Sorry, I know we use acronyms all the time. And they were they were not opposed to the demolition or the partial demolition of that building in order to be able to get the light rail to work out well here. So of that, we know that for certain on the 16 North. We don't know for certain any impacts. We don't foresee any on the 16 South option as far as building impacts. And again, on the 7th Avenue North, as we discussed earlier, we just haven't put enough into the design effort on that and studied that corridor. But we certainly hope to not impact any buildings and provide very minimal impacts to right away if we could. And again, that would be determined based upon if we could run that corridor elevated and avoid having to impact right of way, or if we would be able to run it at grade and also still be able to maintain lanes of traffic and good level of service for vehicular traffic on that corridor.
Our frustration on the west side is that any proposal for service to the West Valley seems dependent on the CAPEX options. Are other options being considered for I-10 West that aren't dependent on some type of CAPEX expansion?
I'm not entirely sure how to answer that one because the current system ends at 3rd Avenue. The only other we've looked at several different alignments, and we still have to get from where the CAPEX project terminates over to the 10 West project. I'm not sure that there has been a lot of other study in terms of other alignments. I don't know, Marcus, Tony, if you guys have any input or background on any other studies that have been done to get to 10 West from the current light rail system.
Yes, what I would say is during the process of determining the three alternatives that you see in front of you and that have been presented to you today, we actually expanded the area. We went as far north as McDowell and went as far south as Buckeye Road, looking at different alternatives of how we could connect to the I-10 freeway. Um, However, as we looked at those alternatives, either through a technical challenge, through financial feasibility challenges, through property impact challenges, uh, those were reduced down to the three that you see here in front of you today. Um, we have to look at, propensity of ridership with potential ridership, costs, all of those things that we have to take into consideration, not only to safeguard the taxpayer dollars, but to make sure that we have a system that is efficient and that will be utilized, and then also to make sure that we have a program that is competitive to receive federal participation as well. And so, like I said, we expanded that route and we looked all the way from McDowell all the way down to Buckeye Road, looking at east-west alternatives to get us a connection to the I-10 extension.
The CAPEX I-10 West project has been approved by voters multiple times. If you go against their wishes, the city of Phoenix will lose trust with voters, and that impacts more than just light rail. Will you include this comment in your report?
I think that's an Erica question.
I can speak to that one, yes. Yes, we will. All the questions asked at these meetings, as well as the comments that you write into your feedback form, are included in the report. So when you fill out your feedback form, be sure to, double check, maybe spell check before you hit submit, because it does get included in the report that we provide directly to Phoenix City Council.
Which of the options is likely to move trains through the CAPEX area the fastest for shortest travel times?
So, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So it really depends on flushing out the design of these. And essentially when we're running light rail, when we can go elevated and avoid intersections that are signalized, we have the ability to move much more efficiently through the corridors. We haven't made full determination yet on all three of these alignments where we would go elevated, but once we get to I-10, we're not dealing with a bunch of stops and traffic signal intersections and whatnot outside of our stations. We're not having to interact with multi modes of transportation at intersections if we go elevated. So that remains to be seen. But right now, the thought process could be that all three of these would have similar times traveling through the capital area. And it just really depends on how much of it we can elevate, keeping in mind that elevating could oftentimes lead to more expense, and also construction inconvenience during timing. And so we would evaluate those options when we have a locally preferred alignment. But we have not broke down each of these to a finite design where we can definitely and without question answer that, because we haven't really worked that design to a final point. Again, we're still in a planning and designing phase, and we need a selected alignment before we spend a lot of money moving forward with the design. So I don't know that answers the question holistically, but I think the times would all be fairly reasonable or close to the same. I don't know if you have any input to that, Tony.
Yeah, good afternoon. Tony Santana, Valley Metro's Deputy Chief, Design and Construction. I think the question too wanted to gear more to which options get us through the capital area faster. As Paul alluded to, the 7th Avenue does have more elevated portion, but that does take us out of the heart of the Capitol Mall area. So when you're looking at the two options that go in the heart of the Capitol Mall area, they would be similar in time because of the fact that about 80% of the alignments up to 14th Avenue are the same until one deviates to the north and the other deviates to the south. But both of those have turns in them. So when you're looking at it from a time perspective, I really wouldn't I wouldn't take that into consideration for which one you're selecting, because the fact that, like Paul mentioned, they would be around the same travel time through the mall area.
Okay, final question at this time. Good afternoon. Assuming there is approval by City Council to move forward, what is the thinking on delivery model? Design, bid, build, or alternative delivery model in parentheses CMGC design build or progressive design build?
So I'll answer that one. We currently are already in the process of construction manager at risk. We do have our construction manager on board and ready to go, as well as our design team. So the delivery method for the CAPEX project would be construction manager at risk.
Okay, one more came in. The intersection at Grand Avenue, 7th Avenue, and Van Buren Street is already congested with traffic traveling in and out of downtown. Wouldn't adding light rail tracks to that intersection as part of the Alignment 3 option only add to the congestion?
Yeah, so we have looked at that, and it is a concern with that particular alignment. However, we do believe that we can mitigate some of that by going elevated at that intersection and potentially not having to interact with the 5 or 6 different ways of traffic at that intersection. But again, like I say, we would have to study that a little bit further. As the question alludes to, though, that is a very busy intersection in Phoenix, and it's something that Phoenix is very sensitive to, and it's something that likely light rail would have to probably elevate to migrate through that intersection and not provide additional disruption to that intersection.
No more questions at this time.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your very thoughtful questions. As I pull up the slide again, letting you know where you can submit your feedback, I do want to say that as far as timing, submitting your comments sooner is, of course, better. I would say the absolute drop dead date in which you should submit your comments is on January 16th. So be sure to get your comments in at valleymetro.org/capex by emailing me at ebrubio@valleymetro.org or by giving me a phone call. Those are added to the record too, before January 16th. We do have some time left, about 10 minutes left of this meeting. So if you have not asked your question yet, it's not too late. You still have time. We will keep this meeting open until our official stated end time at 1 p.m. At that point, we will conclude the meeting. And so we will go ahead and hang out here in case there's any last minute questions. I'd also like to open it to Marcus or Paul, Tony, if you have any final comments as we are wrapping things up.
The only thing that I would add to what we've said today is just to reiterate again that how important it is to receive this feedback and that we are able to provide this feedback to our mayor and council. January 27th is not far away. We're looking at 3 weeks away from today, and so well, 21 days, sorry, from today, which will come extremely quickly. And so we really encourage people not to belabor this, not to, procrastinate, to get online, fill out those forms, get that information in as quickly as possible so that you can make sure that your comments and your concerns or your recommendations or your support, wherever you fall, that's reflected in that report and that information is provided to our mayor and our council. The last thing that I will say, and I'll hand it over back to the team, is that we thank you for taking the time to be here. Your time is your most valuable currency that we possess. It's one thing that you spend and will never get back. And so we do thank you for taking your time. We know that this is an important item that we're dealing with right now, and it's not just important for our mayor and council, but important to our constituents, important to our residents, important to our transit riders, and even some of our non-transit riders who understand the importance of just having those transit options. And so it's important that you're able to be here and share this information, and we thank you for that, and we thank you for taking your time to be with us.
While we have you here, I will also continue to encourage um, speaking about this with your community. Tell your friends, your family, your colleagues that there is the opportunity to weigh in on this matter. There are more meeting opportunities to do this. You can join us tonight. uh, yeah, tonight at 6 p.m. for an additional virtual meeting. If anybody is interested in an in-person meeting, we are holding an in-person meeting on January 15th. That is a Thursday at Neighborhood Ministries, which is near the Capitol Mall area. So please let your friends know. You can go to valleymetro.org/CAPEX, where the meeting information for the 15th and, of course, the meeting tonight is posted. And please share that broadly. Of course, if you do not have the time to visit an in-person meeting, there is a narrated video available on the CAPEX webpage at valleymetro.org/CAPEX. And so if you know any people out there who are located near the alignments, who are avid public transit users, they and who may not have time to go to the in-person meeting, they can always view the narrated video and provide their feedback online. Okay, I'm going to do one last call for questions. If we do not receive a question by 12:55, we will go ahead and conclude the meeting. So we will wait patiently for any last inquiries, any last thoughts that may pop up. Okay, before we hit 12:55, I'm going to add one more thing. I will also let you know that those narrated videos are also available in Spanish as well. So if you have any Spanish-speaking family members or friends, there is a video for them as well as a Spanish language feedback form that they can use to submit their comments. All right, everyone, it is 12:55. We have no further questions. So at this point, we will take one final opportunity to very sincerely thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. As Marcus mentioned, our time is precious, and we really appreciate the fact that you spent your time getting educated on this matter and providing your feedback that will have a strong influence and can inform the future of light rail in Phoenix. So we very much appreciate your participation and your interest in supporting our growing city. Marcus, any final words? All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice afternoon.